We are live. It tells me we're live. So I've got a regular ritual when this happens. I go to my Twitter, okay? Because I've done this a lot now, but I just never believed technology. So I go to my Twitter. I go to my timeline on Twitter. Go to my timeline. I'm not there yet. Takes a while to load up. Now I'm about to be there. We did it. We are live, gentlemen. We are live.
Excellent.
We all did it. And how funny that we're joined by a special guest. And I'm just so honored that you made it backstage. Isn't that funny?
Thank you.
And Dennis, thank you. And other people are joining us. Dennis mistakenly sent the wrong invitation. He sent the backstage pass to this broadcast. And I think he meant to send the front row seats. Take it to the front row. But it did lure in Stephen Quast. So thank you so much for being here. And would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Steve Quast, and I've been an Air Force officer my whole life. But since a young officer as an astronautical engineer, I could see the power of space. I could read about those that have articulated this vision since the 1960s. And it's about time humanity tap into the power of space to solve its problems and to resolve issues across the globe for every human being. It goes far beyond borders. It is the most inspirational economy humanity could ever build. We are on the edge of greatness if we can build it.
That's remarkable. And it goes much further than that because I'm just so familiar with your career and your advocacy of Space Force. In fact, perhaps I could even say the battles that and a kind of a congressional gauntlet that you had to run on behalf of America and on behalf of our future in space, on behalf of all the millions of jobs that's going to be created. And you were kind of single-handedly for a while running that gauntlet. So thank you so much.
Well, never single-handedly, believe me, there is an entire generation of visionaries and doers like Dennis Wingo and Peter Garrettson and Coyote Smith, and the list goes on and on. Builders who are creating this bow wave of vision that will change the world.
Yeah, and I still haven't introduced Dennis, but I'm going to ask you one more question. So Dennis, is that all right with you?
Indeed.
It's such an honor. Is Space Force now out of a quiet period? Because I know there was kind of a mandated quiet period that everybody had to comply with.
Well, let's answer that question in a few months because this change of administration has a lot of dominoes that have not been put into place yet with regard to who the leaders will be. So we'll see. Time will tell over the next few months.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to ask one more thing of you, Stephen. And then Dennis, I haven't asked anything of you. So this is kind of exciting for me. It's a surprise for all of us. Stephen, is it, and I don't want to oppose, although I'm an imposing host, would it be all right to join us, or would you rather kind of now go back into the first row?
Yeah, you can send me back to the first row. This is, the people that are joining this event need to hear what Dennis has to say. It is the most powerful element of what is coming before us with the Space Force and the economy of the future. So let's keeping it focused on that is going to be really important.
Thank you so much for that. And again, I'm just so honored that you made it to the backstage, and I'll be waving at you into the front row. So thanks again.
Steve, I sent the link for the front row to you to your email.
I will jump off this link and back onto that one. Thank you very much, Adam. Well done.
Thank you so much. And Dennis, we're here. That was, and I'm still eager for you to introduce yourself, but I've got to tell everybody from where I'm sitting, kind of at the front door of the backstage, right? And Dennis sent the wrong invitation. So he sent kind of the backstage pass. And I see so many of Dennis's very distinguished colleagues are in the backstage, and I haven't let them in, and I don't think I should. I think it would get too crowded here, and we only have just a little bit of champagne. So it's going to be you and me, Stephen. Is that all right?
Dennis.
I'm sorry. I've still got Stephen on my mind. I'm just so thrilled. I'm a big fan of his, and I'll include a link to some of the op-eds that Stephen has written. Dennis, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself? Would that be all right?
Sure. I'm Dennis Wingo. I'm actually from Alabama. I'm a big Crimson Tide fan. My family has a railroading history, but my history is with the space age. I'm a child of the space age. I was 9 years old when Neil and Buzz walked on the moon, and I'm very fortunate to count Buzz as a friend these days. I tried the vocational path in school in electronics just so I could have something to fall back on if academia didn't work out. And then I got a job in the computer industry in 1978, when I love to tell the students today that you could get a job then if you knew which end of a soldering iron was hot. So I rode that bow wave of what we called at that time the microcomputer revolution, working for some incredible people. The former head of Hughes Research Laboratories, Dr. Robert Hart, at a company called Vector Graphic Inc. I helped build the world's first 1 gigabyte hard drives. A company called IBIS. I helped build for Marvin Minsky the world's first AI machine called the Lisp machine. I got to work on a lot of cool projects. We helped build the world's first terabyte class systems in 1986. So all this stuff was in the 1980s, but my first love is always space. So I walked away from the industry and went to the University of Alabama, Huntsville, where I was exceptionally fortunate to be able to go to the 30th anniversary of the launch of Explorer 1 in 1987. So I got to meet Major General Robert Medeiros, who had been von Braun's boss in the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, and I met several of the von Braun team members. And I was so fortunate that I was able to learn ion propulsion at the feet of Dr. Ernst Stuhlinger, one of the inventors of ion propulsion and a von Braun lieutenant. I worked at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and went to school at the same time for 10 years, almost 10 years, building flight hardware. We flew the first MacIntosh on the Space Shuttle in 1992 on STS-47, then STS-56. We flew it several times. We were one of the first people who got behind the curtain at Apple with Steve Jobs' permission. And so we had a lot of fun with that. We built the first non-NASA satellite in the state of Alabama and flew it in 1998. A bunch of students under the, let's call it the inspiration of Peter Diamandis, the founder of the International Space University, and the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space and Singularity. So I've known Peter and these guys a long time. I worked on the world's first commercial lunar mission at that time called Lunar Prospector, which flew eventually in 1998 as well as a NASA project. And after I left the university, I decided that I really didn't want to go to work for NASA or big aerospace. I wanted to help bring what we learned in Silicon Valley and the rapid technological advancement to space. And nobody wanted to hear it when we started this 30 years ago now. But the movement grew. We built smaller and smaller satellites, more and more capable. In a way, we were the first student satellite NASA ever supported. And after the aftermath, it took 9 years to get our satellite flown. NASA and some academics like Bob Twiggs and Gilmore, who just passed away, created the CubeSat standard, which now has changed the world in space. And so we've had a lot of fun, but my forte is larger systems and what we call on-orbit assembly, the moon. I've written books on the moon. I've written books with the National Defense University on the theory of space power. So and have just recently wrote one for the Joint Staff on resiliency in space. So I'm very familiar with the subject that we're talking about today, but I also take the historical tact because we only know where to go if we know where we have been.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you, I see a lot of questions here, and you might see them as well. There's on your left hand, on your right hand side.
You got to tell me I don't pay any attention to them.
You're missing some awesome questions, and I didn't want to go into the questions yet because I want you to go backwards a little bit, but I want to show everybody where the questions are going to go to because I think it's so interesting. And we're going to try and do this as a 4-parter with Dennis and with others, because it gets really kind of granular. There's just so much happening. And I'll tell some of the questions I see that are interesting, and then we'll go backwards.
Sure. We're very free form here.
We are. And so Tracy Lou is here. So thank you so much for joining us. And Tracy, and she has a book out, and I'm very excited. I ordered her book. And after ordering her book, I discovered that I'm in it a little bit. So that's even awesomer. So Tracy Lou says, thank you again for joining us. If Space Force are the guardians, who or what are they guarding us against?
Tracy, that's a great question. And in kind of contrast to some of the military services like our United States Air Force that is designed to kill people and break things, or the U.S. Army that does the same thing, the Space Force and the aspirational direction of it is, and there was just an article this morning that this asteroid Apophis, which is coming by the Earth in 2029, there's an increased possibility that it will hit the Earth in 2068. Now that's far out there, but if it's that far out, we have time to deal with it now. And that would be one of the Space Force's primary jobs, because what most people don't realize, and I'm a scientist and historian of science, is that 11,000 years ago, an asteroid hit the big ice sheet that was 2 miles thick over North America at the end of the Ice Age. And it sent us back into the Ice Age for 1,000 years. And it looks like it may have wiped out whatever humans were on our continent at that time, and the North American continent had to be repopulated, and all of the megafauna that the saber-toothed tigers and all that may have been what wiped them out. We're still working that problem, but just think about today, if even a moderately sized asteroid hit the Earth, we lost the dinosaurs. We really don't want to lose humans, and now we have a way to deal with it.
I'm sorry.
Also, and I'll be real quick, coronal mass ejections. In 1859, there was one that if it happened today would wipe out. Nobody would have Twitter for 50 years if a coronal mass ejection happened today.
Not a bad thing.
And the space, yeah, really.
Society might improve.
And the Space Force, with a project I'll talk a little bit about today that we're advocating called the Sentinel program, could give us a half an hour look ahead to know if that's going to happen, and that would give us time to shut down the electrical power grid, probably saving 3 billion lives.
That would be a good thing, right?
That would be a good thing.
But then there's also things, and I don't want to get lost in the question because I told everyone I was going to kind of give a preview of where we're going, not just today, but with other periscopes discussing Space Force. But there's just so much that else, I guess, to be guarding, because there's also kind of threats from other countries, economic threats.
There's commerce. The Space Force and kind of its implementation, this is why our friend Bill Shatner was saying, hey, you need to take the Navy route, not the Air Force route in your command structure, in that the Space Force is much like the Navy to protect commerce. And so, if we're on the moon and our friends from another country say, hey, I want to take your mining site, the Space Force is there to protect those people. And that will happen at some point in the future. The same thing at Mars or in the asteroid belt. We are on the cusp of an entirely new civilization. We are about to transition from a terrestrial-only civilization to an interplanetary civilization. And we need protection and the rule of law as we make that movement outward. And this is what the Space Force will do.
And we're going to go back. We're going to go backwards or forwards, but then I want to go all the way back.
We're going to go both ways.
There's so much. There's just so much here, and it's such an exciting thing. And we haven't even gone to the history part, which I think is so important. But we'll do it kind of like a science fiction movie where you see the future, and then we'll discuss the past and how we got to the future. So the emissary code. Thank you so much for joining us. Asks, what's the most lucrative venture within the next 10 years with regards to space startups and bids?
You know, that's the same question that we posed in 1993 when the internet was opened up and the .com started. In 1993, I watched a thing called the World Wide Worm, and I watched the number of websites begin its exponential growth. And the internet was growing at 20% per month. None of us at that time could have ever predicted Twitter. And so it's not going to be the most lucrative venture. There's going to be a plethora. There's going to be an ecosystem. Just like in 1993, my wife and I call pre-1993 the before time, because it truly is. The world changed after the .com, after the internet opened up. From being a military project, which is what it was. It started by DARPA. When it opened up, the world changed. The same thing is going to happen with space, and there's going to be dozens and hundreds and thousands of new lucrative ventures created.
Thank you so much. And we're about to go backwards, but before we do, I want to be responsive to this question because it's kind of an interesting question and that it can't really be answered in a way, right? So Pastor Derek T., thank you so much for joining us. Asked, a Space Force investment possibilities list would be helpful. Indeed, well, it would be helpful for everybody, eh?
Well, and this is all public knowledge. The focus of the Space Force in the next several years is going to be on logistics. There's an old saying that armchair generals talk about battles, but generals talk about logistics. Without logistics, you can't win battles. And this is the genius of the United States in World War II, is that we created the most incredible logistics infrastructure in history, starting after 1941. That's how we actually won the war, is through logistics and the people at the point of the spear and the bravery of our troops. But it's going to be all about logistics for at least the next decade.
And is logistics something that can be monopolized? Because I know Amazon has really made quick inroads into that. And is that a threat?
But, you know, Amazon's only one company, and Jeff Bezos is only one person. We're at the beginning, and I'm going to trod slightly in my direction. We're working in space logistics right now. Think of this: laser communications, terabytes and terabytes stored in space, servers in space, lunar mining, lunar production, lunar industry, transportation to Mars. That's what Elon's been working on for 20 years. And look at where he's at. Could anyone predict in 2002? And I sat down with Elon for 4.5 hours in 2002, just as he was getting started. No one could have ever predicted that Elon would be where he's at today.
Can I tell you a funny story? I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Yeah,
right?
Go for it.
It's lunch with friends, and thank you. And you're the guest of honor, and I'm like, I'm the host in a way, right? But I'm kind of rude sometimes, so I apologize. Do you know I first met Elon around 2002 also?
Yeah.
I kind of mocked, not in front of him, but in my head, I kind of mocked SpaceX. I thought there was an absurdity to it and a kind of why bother type of thing. And over the years, 2010, 11, 12, and to where we are now, I'm just his biggest fan. I think of him as kind of a Da Vinci in our own times.
Well, Elon, at that same time, I met him right after he came back from Russia. And what he originally wanted to do is put a greenhouse on Mars for inspiration. And so he goes over to Russia, and he had been told some bad information before he went over there about Russian launch prices, and the Russians gave him the real prices, and he got pissed off, and he says, well, I'm going to come back over here. I'll build my own damn launch vehicle. And he did. And when I sat down with him, he gave me a set of aspirational goals. He has accomplished all of them. And so Elon, I admire Elon a lot. He's done everything he said he would do, and he's doing it with dedication for all humanity. And I can't say enough good about Elon. Nobody's perfect, but Elon's a good fella.
Yeah, if the megacorps really do take over and they kick out the countries and kind of make themselves the sovereign things that we have to report to, then I want to live in SpaceX land.
Elonia?
I volunteer myself to as like a homesteader to go into SpaceX land.
Well, it's interesting. You see this same dynamic if you watch the television program, The Expanse. The government still have all the guns at the end of the day. And this is another role for space forces, is that we need the rule of law, and that rule of law needs to be responsive to the people, not to a single individual. And so the Space Force is kind of also there to keep, like the guy who's the evil guy in The Expanse from being too big. And so the governments have their role, and governments in response to the will of the people is a good thing, even though that it kind of goes crazy one way or another in these times. We need governments and we need corporations. We need all of the above to make the world go around.
That's awesome. I've got to consider that the government still has the guns. I got to put that into kind of synthesize that thinking into my own kind of schematic of the world in the future. And there's some other questions here, and we have to take them because they're so awesome.
Go for it, man. We could just do this.
The first one is mine, though, right? Another one of mine is The Expanse a good show? I didn't want to see it because I don't want to in any way see kind of almost a ridicule. It's not Star Trek to me.
No, it's not. It's The Expanse, though, I think is a fabulous show, and I think everyone should see it to see one play out of a possible future. The only problem I have with The Expanse, and I've shared this with the writers, and they agree with me, but this is what was in the book, is that in The Expanse, the greatest deficiency is that they consider that resources are still limited when we're out there, but they're not. And so, but the limited resources is a plot device that helps create tension in the show. But in reality, the level of resources just in between here and Jupiter are 1 trillion billion times more than what we have able to access here on the Earth. And so this is part of our advocacy, in that there was a book, 1972, to bring history into it here, Adam, called Limits to Growth, that they completely dismissed space. And I will tell you, an entire political movement and part of the climate change movement today is based on the premise that we only have this one planet and we're doomed to this one planet. We got to make the best of this one planet. So we got to basically control humanity. Well, that's not true. We have a glorious future because we have 1 trillion billion times more resources between the moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, Jupiter, and beyond. We live in an amazingly rich solar system that we've been given for ours to play in.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I see another question, and then we're going to go backwards. So,
right.
Because it's an interesting question, and I know a young person who's very impressive, and I actually did a Periscope with him, and we were discussing employment opportunities because he's like this fantastic kind of developer, genius kid. And we were discussing SpaceX's spin outs and some of the people I know within them. And he was saying, well, can you put me in? Can you help me get a job there? And I told him the only advice, and maybe the best advice I could give him, is I would, as a young person or as even a fairly older person, take a job doing their cleanup, doing the mopping or the housekeeping there, whatever it is. I've seen good friends of mine at Amazon who were there from pretty much the earliest days just do phenomenal. Same at Tesla, where they've just done phenomenal. I would take any type of job there. So I don't think people should have a lot of vanity and then hope to transfer that vanity to some other type of company, because you never know what those companies' skill sets are going to be needing next year, and kind of it's fluid. So this question, and then we'll go back to history. So Sam Kumar, thank you so much for being here. and I really like that picture. So thank you. How would I get? Sam Kumar asks, how would I get a job, role, gig in this industry? Thoughts?
Well, if you're an American right now, if you're an American citizen or have a green card, send me an email. We're hiring a developer right now. And Adam is exactly right in that I started in the computer industry as a technician. I was very fortunate that right out of high school, things were so gung ho. And I will tell you, it's starting that way right now in space. Let's call it the traditional aerospace talent's already been sucked up. We're training new engineers ourselves from the computer industry and other industries to work on our space-related activities. So, you're right. Have a little humility. I mean, my first job in the computer industry in California, I slept in my car for 5 months until I could afford to get a place. And I was working 18 hours a day in manufacturing and board test, troubleshooting boards every day. And however many boards myself and one other person fix that one day, that's how many computers our company shipped. So we made ourselves very valuable. So there's plenty of opportunities, and developers are absolutely fabulous. Get to know bare metal systems on a chip, things close to the hardware. That's where your value is going to be.
So I want to ask you more about that. I'm so fascinated by that. What are, and you discussed it somewhat, so I would actually ask you to kind of do an expanse on it more, which is, what are the particular niches and segments within it, and let's just collectively call it a Space Force, where you see the most hiring and human capital requirements? And then the second part of that, right, a follow-up before you answer the first, a follow-up to that would be, are those going to be W-2 employees the way you see them, or will they be 1099, or what do you see kind of the employer-employee relationship being in those jobs?
As you know, the state of California has destroyed 1099, literally destroyed it. You have to incorporate, you have to, have a corporation even if you're a young person, because the whole gig economy is completely screwed up by our state government. So we hire W-2 employees simply because we don't want to have to deal with all the crap from the state. But in terms of skill sets, mathematicians, guidance, navigation, and control, hardware design, software developers. Oh my goodness, I killed everything and I didn't kill that. Developers who understand mathematics and the intersection between math and software. I tell you, there's people making $500 an hour doing some of this stuff. Get in there, be good at it, dedicate yourself, and you're going to be valuable.
And we're going to skip to the last question for this moment, because it's a question that also allows you to go backwards a little bit, because I think Space Force, SpaceX, and kind of that industry and the ecosystem that's building out requires some kind of historical context.
Absolutely.
Right? And I was just discussing this with you before, and I discuss this a lot. So even in the morning, that when you see all the remarkable things that SpaceX and so many other companies are doing in propulsion and in metals and composites and just everything that's going on, you need to understand that what came before and how these companies went from a 0 to 60, right? Or it's kind of incredible. So the question is really this, and we're not discussing the political implication. We're discussing the policy of it, right?
Yeah.
So rather than kind of any type of a partisanship. So hopefully everybody can understand the spirit of the question, because I think it's very generous, and the spirit of his answer. So I can't really see, now that I clicked on it, I can't really see it as well, but the real Stan Man, thank you so much for being here, asks, hi, Dennis, do you think the Biden administration will increase funding for Space Force?
I don't know. I think there was an interesting thing that Mr. Biden did yesterday in his first day in the Oval Office. He has a picture of Ben Franklin behind him, and he has a moon rock also. And Ben Franklin was a maestro. He was a Da Vinci of his time, technologist, philosopher, politician. He was an amazing, amazing fellow. And then obviously the moon rock. And Mr. Biden yesterday talked about, we want to build on the great things that we have done and build a future. And so I think it was a very hopeful address. The details of the sausage of lawmaking, I can't tell you because
funding, because we just did see a funding bill, and it was clearly from coming out of the Trump administration. So I'm not sure if we'll see any corrections or any changes within it.
Well, I don't think they will take money away. I think there's tensions within any administration philosophically on what they want to do. So let's say that between now and September 30th, they're fine. But, I am just hopeful that in this regard, because I don't care who started it. I first started working with Senator Bob Smith of New Hampshire in the 1990s on the Space Force. The Space Force is something that had to happen because the United States Air Force, as wonderful of an organization as it was, and this goes back to the history now. Now we can go to the history. In the same manner that in World War II, we had the United States Army, and then we had the United States Army Air Corps. And what does the Army do? It's on the ground, it moves, it fights battles. And aircraft were originally designed, even in World War I, to support the guys on the ground by shooting up stuff and dropping bombs in front of the troops. Well, in World War II, you had the fighter planes, and then you started this thing called strategic bombing. And strategic bombing has very little to do with what the Army's doing on the ground. It has to do with breaking the infrastructure of your adversary. Like, we sent 1,000 bombers over Germany. We sent 1,000 bombers over to Japan. We basically burned their cities to the ground. And so, but that had only, it supported what the Army did, but it had nothing to do with the Army. And then after the war, our leadership, President Truman and the administration then, I keep getting spam calls. I apologize for that. They saw the need to separate the strategic, because then the whole Russian thing and the Cold War, and the Air Force was the lead in delivering nuclear weapons, not the Army, not even really the Navy at that time, but it was the Air Force. And so they had to create a new organization called the United States Air Force that was solely concerned with how to do air power. Well, fast forward from 1947 to today, in that we have space starting in 1957. Space is growing in importance, and space goes from our atmosphere all the way to infinity. But the Air Force doesn't care about infinity. It cares about dropping bombs and fighting air battles and stuff like that. And space is only supportive, communications and remote sensing. So the officer corps and the classes that they're taught are about air power, about dropping bombs, about strategic battles and stuff like that. It's not about coronal mass ejections or protecting from asteroids or supporting commerce in the economic development of the solar system. So these forces have created an impetus and a demand for a new military organization to where the training and the leadership are focused on the problems of space, not the problems of dropping bombs on our adversaries.
Wow, that was incredible. That actually brings us to another question. And I would love to, if you could figure out a way, because it's so incredible, kind of the JFK and the budgeting discussions then, and how we got to where we are. And I know it's such a...
Oh, no, I'll do that.
Let's not get to it yet, because I'm sure it's going to come up, because there's so many questions here. And Anand, thank you so much for being here. Asks, it's a question I'm so interested in. Where will space tech take us by 2030? And what does this mean for life on Earth?
Well, I seriously think that our friend Elon is going to go orbital with the Starship this year. And I think within the next 3 or 4 years, maybe sooner, that Elon will be able to create his full version of the Starship, which can carry 100 tons to space. that will initiate the beginning of a new age of mankind. It truly will. A cost-effective way to get a lot of payload to space is what we have been fighting for decades. And so with that, the first step is our greatest step, and the big step that Neil Armstrong did is back to the moon. And so I think we will have, and I intend to stay around hopefully long enough to participate in this, lunar industrialization. I think by 2030, we will have that. I think we will be doing things like creating diamond glass. We will be obtaining platinum group metals. We'll be getting thorium from the lunar soil to make reactors for space. We will get titanium from the moon. We'll get water from the moon for propellant. We will be on Mars. I am quite certain that Elon Musk is going to retire on Mars. And I think by 2030, we will have humans on Mars done by our friend Elon Musk.
Okay, so now let me ask you a question, because this brings up a very interesting budgeting point. And I discussed with my own analyst, who I asked to kind of do some forensics on the recent budget. But the Mars project was significantly underfunded this year. So does that basically means that we're now handing it over to I hate to say the oligarchs, because I don't want to suggest that cruelty, but in terms of their political influence and economic influence, does that basically mean now that the Mars mission has been underfunded, that it now hands it over to them to complete all those, kind of even contracts that need to be completed and satisfied?
We don't know yet, to be honest. A lot's going to depend on Mr. Biden. And again, I point to that moon rock, and I point to Benjamin Franklin. And I happen to know the new White House liaison between NASA and the White House. She's a remarkable woman. She interviewed me about my business, which is own orbit assembly of large spacecraft, a few years ago. There are some exceptionally smart people, and we're in a different age now. I started as a student in the 1980s because I wanted to be part of the space exploration initiative that George Bush Sr. started. And my very first public speaking was to get up to a microphone in front of all these NASA officials and says, "You guys have had 20 years. Why the hell haven't we gotten back to the moon?" And we've been fighting that battle for 32 years since then. But with the rise of China, and with the world recovered from World War II and moving forward, the world has changed. And I really think that we're on that step. And I'm hopeful that the folks in the Biden administration, and I advocate, you're talking about $1.9 trillion in stimulus. If we want to do that, let's put 10% of that in space. If we did that, we would change the world for the better forever. And so I'm hopeful that these guys, a lot of them who realize that, and will take the high road.
So we're going to go on to our next question. Even though it still questions, that last question still questions, or have we handed over some of these national interests, such as the Mars mission? Have we handed it over to private enterprise? And does that kind of now exclude us, except for those megacorps and oligarchical type of generosities?
Space is about people at the end of the day. And I think the biggest problem of the government space program starting in the 1960s is this right stuff mentality. That, you've got to have this amazing, and they're all amazing people. I have a lot of astronaut friends, including Buzz, and they're super smart, they're super driven, but space is for people. You got to have janitors in space. You got to have people to cook food. You got to have people to clean up food in space. I mean, space is for everyone. And there was one of the guys from Foundation Imaging, a guy by the name of Paul Bryant, gave a speech at a Space Frontier Foundation conference that I was at 25 years ago. Said, we'll know we've made it in space when we have the first bus for prostitution and the first bus for drugs. because that's part of humanity. And I think it's all for humanity. And to go to his question, will future wars exclusively happen?
Let me ask this question, because some people won't be viewing this; they'll actually be listening to it. So let me make sure that it's included within. And I'd like to thank so much. I can see it only in small print. Could be my fault. Paul Schlein, Shlaen, Shlaen. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. And they ask, will future wars exclusively happen in space?
No. At the end of the day, war is about killing. And that's just what war is about. And this is why we need to think really, really carefully about some of the rhetoric that we hear between different tribes today. War is about killing. War is about blood. Wars will not be fought exclusively in space. Wars will create tears. It will create graves. We need to think really damn hard about what we're talking about today and what war really means.
And here's a really interesting question. And I want to thank Bob. And then there's a whole bunch of numbers after it. So I'm just going to say Bob. And it's a very pleasant picture. So thank you so much. Question I think about as well is in terms of participation, how can non-STEM professionals help the space industry? So how can non-STEM professionals participate in the space industry?
We need everybody. We need architects. We need accountants. We need, food service workers. We need everybody. Space really is for the people. And this is my counter. And I know Elon well enough that I don't think, you saw this movie, I forgot what it was, that Jodie Foster was in, Elysium, to where they had some kind of, oligarchical O'Neill kind of colony, and everybody on Earth was in poverty. That's not the way it's going to be. Space is for everybody. Space needs everybody. It needs poets. It needs musicians as well.
Yeah, but there's a volatility to those type of industries as well. So, I mean, for example, I think you and I were discussing it. I was discussing it with actually one of the relativity people. Is even in space, my friend was saying that even just dry cleaning in space and cleaning clothes in space is an extraordinary enterprise, and that in itself creates an ecosystem of innovation into how you're going to clean thousands of pounds, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of pounds of clothes in space. Because right now, I didn't realize that they're basically just wearing the same clothes day after day after day.
Well, and then they throw them away. But see, that's on the International Space Station. Let's call that, that's a Type 0 space facility. It's a first thing, but larger space facilities in the future are going to have gravity, and on the moon you'll have gravity, and so washing will happen the same way it always has. In zero G, we're going to have to be innovative, because people are going between here and Mars, and they don't want to throw their clothes away, and resources are going to be valuable. So I think you're right. There's going to be a tremendous amount of innovation in the way that we clean clothes and the way that we make clothes.
And then in terms of but if people are going to live in cislunar, or there's going to be a lot of people living in cislunar orbit, or a lot of kind of even a hospitality industry in space, right? Are they going to be existing in a low gravity environment, or
it will be a lower gravity environment? Or you could even have, fitness freaks who want a 2G space station so they can really bulk up, man. So think about it that way. Some bodybuilding freaks who would just love to practice in 2 gravities.
No, I don't. But I know.
I do.
Oh, cool. And so Ed Lattimore is here, and thank you so much. Ed is awesome. I really want to do a Periscope with Ed, and I was just reading one of his posts about his personal experiences. So Ed Lattimore asks, I wonder how quickly we can overcome the main limitations of interstellar traveling.
It will be after these gray hairs are in the ground. We're going to have to go out there. We're going to have to gain experience out there. We're going to need people who think. It's like what we're talking about with the Space Force, people that think in that direction, we're going to need people who are living on the moon or living on Mars, who think about the problem, who have access. Because right now, the biggest thing that precludes that is energy. Energy drives everything. So, when we can build a gigawatt class nuclear reactor, fusion or fission, that, weighs 1,000 pounds, we'll be on the way to doing that. But we can't do that today because our level of technology. But in 20 years, I think we'll be building megawatt reactors in space. And in 40 years, 50 years, it'll be gigawatts. Think about the Starship Enterprise. Everybody's watched Star Trek. Has anybody ever thought about how much energy it takes for that replicator to make Captain Picard's cup of Earl Grey tea? That's terawatts of power.
Well, it's lithium crystals. Right?
Yeah, well, you have dilithium, but you also have antimatter. You have ubiquitous antimatter and you have dilithium crystals. So, but you got to have energy to do these things. We're not going anywhere out of our solar system until we have a minimum of gigawatts of electrical power. So if you want to work on something that pushes us in that direction, there's your target.
Wow. In advance of this, you and I were talking about just discussing the history of such things. And we haven't done that. And I think that's kind of cool in a way, because there's so many interesting things here going on. And Gerard Ryder, thank you so much for joining us. And if I recall, is that an image that you shared of that you use of, was it your grandfather? I think it was a relative, right? So Jared, thank you so much for joining us. Ask, what software technology should one study to get a job in the space industry?
Embedded, C++, Python, all the stuff, Libero, FPGA design. FPGA design is kind of like a bridge between hardware and software. Learn about all of these technologies, because I will tell you a secret, big secret. Don't tell Elon. The success of SpaceX is based on software. The success of SpaceX is based on software. And I can't give you the numbers because I kind of received them through various means. But the computer that operates the first stage of the Dragon is thousands of times faster than the one that NASA has on the SLS launch vehicle. And just think about in your brain, you software and hardware guys, how many computations and what kind of computational system it takes to be in that first stage to guide it down to a soft landing. That's an amazing feat of software and hardware design.
And we're going to go on. So thank you so much. Andy Slicers, I think he was responding to Jared's question. And I just want to get an agree or disagree or explanation, right? It says invest in data.
Well, depends on what the data is. Obviously, I would say invest in data infrastructure in space.
Wow. And help me understand this, because it's so interesting, and it's space stations. So thank you so much for joining us. And what does this mean?
I know what it means. I know.
Okay. Yeah. So I saw it and it was so cryptic, and I wanted to give it to you. So Space Stations says U.S. Gerald Ford 17. Well, I'll let you read it. So you can.
The USS Gerald Ford, which is the Ford class aircraft carrier that's replacing the Nimitz class aircraft carrier, is $17.5 billion. And this and Space Station says a 26 segment lunar gravity station is $13 billion. Well, if it's built by the government, we've already spent more than that on SLS, so that's not going to happen. But the Gerald Ford has a purpose. It's a warship. It is it's something built to protect the nation and to support commerce. So think of it this way. It is my proposition that when we get to the moon and when we start industrializing the moon, we'll be able to drop the price of that 26 segment lunar gravity station to about $1 billion, if not less. So that's where the focus is. Don't worry that we spend $17.5 billion for an aircraft carrier. We need aircraft carriers until they kind of get blown up in the first 10 minutes of the next war. But we it's about priorities. And so this kind of gestalts it a little bit. We need to, in my opinion, as a nation, and this is part of the Space Force as well, we need to start focusing outward. Right now, as I talk about it, we're spending all of our time peeing in each other's shoes. There's bigger fish to fry.
Is that a saying? Is that a saying? I've
Yeah.
never heard that before. Is that a saying that anybody else other than you has ever said?
Oh, no. It's an old Southern saying, pissing in each other's shoes. That's people doing this. It's arguing.
I'm going to find occasions to say that.
Well, I've heard it a lot among the old men in Alabama when I was a child. And it's talking about people that just argue with each other all the time. All the time that you spend arguing with each other, you can't focus on the future.
We're gonna have to skip around now. There's a lot of questions here, and I want to be, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And this has drifted off in such a way. And I'm going to answer this question first, okay? So Daytona 38 asked, and let me respond to it first, please. Says, what space startups are doing logistics right now? And if I can just first be responsive to that, is I wanted to do this in several different segments. I'm going to continually replay this one for myself and for other people. So because we need to get a historical context and just kind of get the vocabulary and share these kind of definitions with these very kind of precise specialist type of terms that we've, all been exchanging here. So I'm also going to have one of my favorite people who's one of the top venture capitalists in the world, who's really created a fund really dedicated to space. Yeah. Because there's just so many different opportunities. And a lot of the questions that I get to, because I'm coming out of venture capital on Wall Street, is valuations and how do you do kind of projections on these kind of exponential type of growth scenarios. But really valuations. And then the second I hear a lot is how to build a team, because a lot of this talent, even including welders, relativity is hiding in welders right now. There's a real scarcity of talent. There's not a lot of slack. There's no slack in this employment market on down. So with that said, and I would also like to include that a good friend of mine who I know offline as well, online he goes by man_integrated, and he's awesome. And he's very involved in the logistics space. And he and I have had offline conversations where we've discussed both Amazon's encroachment into that monopoly, as well as really all the possibilities for new entrants to really kind of stake their claim into it. So with that said, could you be responsive to that question? What space startups are doing logistics right now?
See, this kind of strikes really close to home. I have to be somewhat self-serving in answering this. Do you mind if I do that? Or if I don't, I don't have to.
Please.
And this is going to be a little bit of our first coming out of stealth mode, my company, Skycorp Incorporated. We have multiple agreements in this area with our friends in blue suits and other areas to work in space logistics, own orbit assembled satellites. I've been talking about this for years. We're working on them right now with the commercial geosatellite industry. There's other great companies. There's a company called Arcasys that's run by a friend of mine, Dave Barnhart, Dr. Dave Barnhart, former DARPA guy, fantastic. And there's other companies that are out there starting, my friend Dan Faber in Orbit Fab. There's several companies. And again, always caveat emptor. Do your due diligence. Just, Adam, do your due diligence. And due diligence is important in this industry because just like when we started a solar company in like 2002 when solar was really starting to take off. And we found that our main competition, because I've been designing solar power systems for 35 years. I know how to do it. I know exactly what to do. But what we saw was, especially after the 2008 crash, people that had been real estate salesmen the year before were now selling solar power systems. And a lot of the problems we had in the growth of that industry was by incompetence, coming in and making wild claims and crowding real companies out of the market.
We've got to keep going on, though. We're going into like a speed round, but we're not in a speed round yet. But I want to be respectful for everybody's time. really interesting question. And you were discussing nuclear here. And I'm so happy that Mark Schneider has joined us, who actually did Periscope number 3. He is really an authority and truly an evangelist on nuclear energy. And he's really responsive because there's so many questions about nuclear energy. And when Mark says, Mark is Sub-Schneider, Sub-Schneider says logistics is the key for the Navy as well. One more reason to follow the Navy model.
He's absolutely right. The Navy model, and again, I'm going to go back to Bill Shatner. Bill Shatner's not a dumb man. I met Bill before several times. But he's in popular culture, and he was an admiral in Starfleet. Star Trek is a Navy model. It was a Coast Guard. Gene Roddenberry envisioned Starfleet as a Coast Guard / Navy model. And I think that's an appropriate cultural, historical model to imprint on the Space Force, because going all the way back to the Phoenicians, it was commerce and military supporting it. The Roman Navy was commerce as well as warfare. And so the naval model has always been that. The Air Force, the air model has always been about killing people and breaking things. And so it's a different mindset. And so the nuclear Navy, whole 9 yards, I completely agree with him.
And thank you so much. And Janan Glasgow is here. So thank you so much for joining us. Interesting question. Says space as a legal domain is interesting. What countries' laws would apply and how to resolve disputes?
Well, there is a lot of fruitful international cooperation. Frequency regulatory is done nationally by the Federal Communications Commission, but internationally by the International Telecommunications Union. It's been in place for 50 years to coordinate frequencies in space. We have COSPAR, which is a United Nations organization, but you also have the U.S. Commerce Department, the U.S. State Department, and a lot of these things we're actually addressing because we're about to make another foundational change. Space.
There has to be a war, though, in terms of whose human rights, whose legal language, right? Whose mediation courts will have jurisdiction over space. Somebody, there's got to be laws of a nation that apply and kind of extend into space.
Well, not nation, but culture. And we're in the middle of a cultural clash between East and West. And we have to make a decision at some point. Do we want an Eastern model or a Western model? Obviously, being from the West, I'm in favor of a Western model, because if you look back in history for thousands and thousands of years, what has been the aspiration in the West is liberty. What has been the aspiration in the East? Control. Which do you desire most?
Wow, fascinating. So we're going to continue going on that, and thank you so much. Really remarkable. Can you believe how much this has jumped around? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that awesome? Right? So Grasshopper Bro, thank you so much for joining us. I think about this question a lot, right? Is knowing that Space Force is coming, what could I do to prepare my kids to take advantage of this?
Well, I just talked to a good friend of mine whose son just got accepted to the Air Force Academy. And now in the Air Force Academy, you can pick whether you want to be Space Force or Air Force. And so the United States Air Force Academy is graduating space professionals in the Space Force. So, if you're a kid, and talk to your senators, because each senator gets to nominate kids to go to the Air Force Academy. And if your kid wants to be a Space Force professional, then that's what you focus on. And then, you do the same thing that you always do when you're in junior high and high school. That's your aspiration. You go for it. You plan for it. When you have your interviews, that's what you want to do. But see, it's Space Force, it's legal. And the previous caller, there's a lot of legal work that needs to be done in space as well.
In terms of kind of like a theoretical, kind of like a conceptual type of framework for a child to advance on, knowing what the future is going to be, how can we kind of make sure that we're participants in the best part of it? So just from a youth down, is there kind of a directional way that a child can kind of
it's
the path along that way?
The fundamental thing is what has always made a success for anyone in any endeavor: dedication, perseverance, hard work. That's what it takes. And if you want to be the first musician on the moon, guess what? That job's open right now. If that's your aspiration, start working on it, because that's what it takes. And each of us, it's my personal opinion, that we all have a calling, that we all have something special that we can do. Each one of us. Do it to the best of your ability, and I think we will all get there.
Yeah. It's a question that I actually think about a lot, because I'm also, if a child were, 10 years old, I wonder how would I kind of point them so as not to kind of, I don't want to infiltrate into whatever aspirations they have as a young person, but how can I be kind of a gentle guide, I suppose? Because
that's why I kind of term it that way. Look inside. What do you think you're here for? And I think there's a generation coming. I see it. We've worked for it for 30 years. I see a young generation, the Gen Z and beyond. They're keyed on this. They want to do this. And I say, go for it. Math, science.
We're going to skip on. And thanks. And so Rising Serpent is here, and thank you so much for joining us. Question I think about a lot, because I do think about the cartelization of what we're experiencing now, right, on Earth, and what we're experiencing kind of the defragmentation of the world, and the cartelization. Clearly, it's become apparent every time we leave our house. We see that things have changed. So Rising Serpent, thank you so much for joining us. Asked, do you worry about the cartelization of space?
And I think the answer is absolutely yes. And President Eisenhower, in his farewell address in 1961, put the scientific technological elite on the same level of danger to the future as a military industrial complex. And so the answer is yes. But again, this is another reason for the Space Force, is so that the power of government, and the biggest problem we have, and I'm going to say it quickly, is that Congress has not evolved quickly to bring new blood into it who are interested in new laws for this new age. There's a group of us that are supporting an Internet Bill of Rights for privacy and all. But the people that control Congress right now, they're still old baby boomers. As much gray hair as I have, I think we need new blood in our legislative, in the presidency. We need new blood.
But in terms of being responsive to that, in terms of being responsive to that, certainly I see that, we're having kind of failures in legislation and kind of forward thinking in it, but that still leaves the question unanswered. Do you worry about the cartelization?
Yes. The answer absolutely is yes. And we have to be ever vigilant to make sure it doesn't happen.
And how will we know when it's happening? Or will we know only when it's too late?
Well, when the first war starts between Bezosia and Elonia.
But then it's too late for them. But by then, all the regulatory oversight has failed. So,
yeah, I mean, sometimes failure happens, and we need to get in front of it now. And this is why we need to quit pissing in each other's shoes and start looking toward the future.
And I'll tell you who just came in, who entered the backstage. And I don't know if you can see that. And I don't want to surprise them and let them know they'd be live if they joined us. But do you see that Brigadier General Steve, that Brigadier General Bucky has joined us?
Oh, I can't see the backstage, so I don't know.
He has. So I'm going to try and message him.
I would advocate not, because in his role, I gave a wrong link to a lot of people, and he is a general officer in the United States military who is subject to the civilian leadership, and it's probably inappropriate for him to make any comment.
Yeah, I was going to try and message him to let him know that we can't let him in and I didn't want to be offensive. And if you would would you like to just give a quick explainer of his role currently and his
Yeah,
role?
and the Defense Innovation Unit, which General Butow is the head of the space portfolio in the Defense Innovation Unit, was actually created by Ash Carter under the Obama administration, because the administration, and this has been going on for a while, realized that the traditional military contractors were falling behind, that their products were substandard and they were taking too long and way too much over budget. And so the Defense Innovation Unit was created as a bridge to Silicon Valley to not try to impose the governmental model on commercial space, but to allow the incredible flowering that has been commercial space and commercial Silicon Valley and all of our technological civilization to revitalize our defense industrial base, as well as to help promote commerce of the nation. It's a noble thing that was started in the Obama administration, and I think it will be supported going forward.
Yeah, and again, even though I can't let him pass the Velvet Road, right? I'm just so honored that he got perhaps the wrong invitation, but that he showed up at the party. So I think that's really awesome. And I was going to message him to join the front row, but I don't think I'll have that chance. So really interesting. And JXS, I have a little bit of a list, says, nice to see Mr. Wingo live. I would agree with that. I think we all would agree with that. Thoughts on the increasing noise about nuclear in space?
I think it's fabulous. And here's the thing. Civilization runs on energy. And solar power is wonderful, but it cannot drive. It's just simply not possible for it to drive terawatts, gigawatts, and terawatts of power in space. Is just too diffuse of an energy source. And nuclear power is going to be required for anything out past Mars. And I think it's wonderful, and I fully support it. And as a historical note, if things had gone the way that the FY 1966 NASA budget had been passed, Apollo 20 would have been a nuclear-powered third stage.
And I see that, and I'm looking for it now, that Mark Schneider again contributed a comment about nuclear energy, because he's been so active in it. So I'm just going to have to scroll around and look for his comment again. So Jedi Mac 3 says artificial intelligence software generators.
I want Jarvis.
Yeah.
I absolutely want Tony Stark's Jarvis. It is my goal in life before I die that I will have Jarvis. And these are just like a knife, a fork, or a spoon is a tool. AI is a tool to help us manage this amazing deluge of data that our civilization has, and to help our minds make sense of it. So, and AI software generators is a specific thing, and it will be interesting to see what the products are. But if it is tailored right, and if it is trained right, we've been doing a lot of machine learning and a lot of AI for the moon, for looking for resources and looking for water. That's another thing we've been doing. I think there's tremendous possibilities.
And we're going to skip on, and we're going to skip to a question that I'm interested in as well. And I'm not going to try and project anything beyond. I think a lot of people here know I'm very bullish both on Space Force and on the defense industry. I've expressed that for a long time because of their handling. They're engaged in very highly complex, very high-hanging fruit, and very expensive problems to solve. So I'm kind of a part of it, right? So Interior Foliage, thank you so much for joining us. How does Boeing fit into the future of space logistics?
Boeing has tremendous possibilities. Boeing's problem, and I was there the day that Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas. I was in a McDonnell Douglas.
I was one of the big short squeezers of McDonnell Douglas. I remember it really well. I remember when their cargo jet, I remember the whole thing.
Yeah, so I was at McDonnell Douglas that day looking at the Delta II production line, and I was walking around saying, "You have been assimilated." But the fact is that McDonnell Douglas used Boeing's money to buy Boeing. So there was a cultural defect that was given to Boeing in that merger that took Boeing away from its engineering focus to a corporate focus, and that destroyed the company. And the way that Boeing is going to fit in the future of space logistics, they need to go back to their roots as an engineering-driven culture, because all of the failures of Boeing in the past 20 years has become by leaving those roots. And so that's how Boeing fits into it. They recoup their engineering excellence, and then I think Boeing can do amazing things. This spacecraft right here behind me, that was built by Boeing, and all 5 of them, built in 1966, were fully successful in mapping the moon.
And so we're gonna go to another question, which is actually really interesting, and it's even there's an irony to it. Is this is also a subject that Tracy follows, who joined us earlier, and asked and posed a question. Kind of discusses. This is kind of one of the things that she kind of theorizes a lot about, as well as I see although I can't let them in, but one of the people knocking on the VIP suite backstage here is Namrata Goswami, and she's a futurist as well. She's a very well-known kind of futurist into space and its implications into national sovereignty. So with that in advance, so Rising Serpent, again, thank you so much for joining us. Ask, does space have its own economy, or does it remain connected at the hip to Earth's economy?
All of the above. And you should let Naomi in. She is a remarkable woman, and you need to have her on a Periscope.
Would it be cruel if I just surprised her?
Yeah, go ahead. Naomi, come on in.
I don't know.
Okay, all right. We'll save that. There she is.
Nope, you see?
Yeah.
Thankfully she wasn't there. It worked out kind of good.
Well, Dr. Goswami, Naomi, is a remarkable, amazing person, and I support everything she does. And space will have its own economy, and it does remain connected at the hip. So it's both, because it's just like on the Earth. The United States economy is not decoupled from the rest of the world. Remember the countries that tried to decouple from the rest of the world, like Albania or China before the great opening in 1972? They were nothing. It's only when we're here together as part of a larger ecosystem that we can all be successful. And each of us, I have products from all over the world. And it's going to be the same thing in space. We're going to have products here. They're going to sell. The moon's going to sell products. It's my personal goal to build interplanetary spaceships in lunar orbit that will traverse the inner solar system. That's one of my goals for my company. So that's where we're going. That's our 15-year plan. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, and what type of kind of autonomous economy would something on the moon or or outside of Earth have?
Yeah, autonomous economies, at least in the next 30 to 50 years, are not really possible. I just, unless something radically changes, there's just certain things that will always be cheaper to get from the Earth. And after the industrial infrastructure is set up, there will always be things that are cheaper to get from space. Raw materials, valuable hardware. There's $100 billion a year on the Earth technological foundation based on doing things in a vacuum. Over 100 billion a year on the Earth. Most of our technologies that we use every day are dependent on vacuum. Well, a lot of those can be done much after the infrastructure is set up, much cheaper and quicker in space. So you're going to see the same kind of shift that we saw in manufacturing from the United States to China. You're going to start to see manufacturing in some industries move to space simply because it's where it gets done most efficiently. But it will still be hooked to the Earth because that's where your 9 billion customers are going to be.
Wow, remarkable. And I'm kind of eager now to one day have the privilege of including Namrata in that. So Ruben, thank you so much for joining us. Interesting. Says initiatives to open source low Earth space navigation software, and by open sourcing, allowing everybody to kind of contribute to its creation, and a license kind of being commonly shared. And then they include within that, and this might be a little bit outside of the conversation, but that the Monty software licenses cost $5,000 a year.
Well, just like we have this wonderful explosion, like Linux, for example, of open source software. It's just waiting on a few really smart people to start creating it. I mean, and I've got the basic books. Go get a book on the mathematical basis of celestial navigation. Okay, start with the math. Do your coding. There's tons and tons of stuff out there. Kerbal Space Program, Scott Manley's Kerbal Space Program. Take that and put it on steroids. There's amazing opportunities to do stuff like that. It's just like what we're doing. We're jumping into the RISC-V ecosystem because ARM is starting to charge too much money. And as soon as NVIDIA buys ARM's going to get even more expensive. So people are already jumping to open source RISC-V. And I think we're going to do the same in software. It's just, you're 10 years old, you want to learn something, learn about celestial navigation, math, write some software, and I think you've got a great future.
And we're going to ask this question because it was included, and I think people are very intrigued. And I really appreciate everybody's time because I try and make this kind of a lunch thing. And now we're like ordering desserts, right? Now we're really kind of treating ourselves. So it's kind of a speed round, right?
Let's do it.
Not too speed round, I'll tell you, but a speed round. So Jam 1776, thank you so much for joining us. Says how to push Congress to support an Internet Bill of Rights.
I will have a draft of Internet Bill of Rights. Let's do an open source, crowdsourced Internet Bill of Rights. I promise to put the first draft out in a couple of weeks. Let's a few 10,000 of us work on it, and then we'll present it to all of our Congress people and say, sign the damn thing. That's really, and I've done this in the past. I was one of the 9 founders of a group called ProSpace, and we started citizen lobbying for space in the early 1990s, and we helped get a lot of stuff done. So remember, this government, you own it. Those people up there are your employees. Just remember that. They don't remember that.
So we're gonna skip around. So DeWhooper Nation, thank you so much for joining us. And I think you changed your image that you use. So cool. Says I'm a mechanical engineer with over a decade of offshore experience. Where should they send their resume to for space? So I think they also mean not maybe necessarily just companies, but kind of directionally. And if you have precision, that would be awesome.
Well, if you're an ME and you're doing a lot of software, SolidWorks, structural analysis, stuff like that, come give us a holler. There's tons of companies that will hire you because, like what you say, Adam, the talent pool is so restricted that it's time to bring more people in. I think you'll have a great opportunity there. And
I wish diversity and kind of bringing more people in to participate has become, clearly, and it should be such an important thing. I wish we could educate our children a little bit more, not necessarily just in STEM, but, I feel that when I look at what our colleges are graduating and the majors that they have, that even if they don't have the STEM background, they might not have kind of that robust education required just to communicate even with people.
Our educational system has been destroyed. I graduated in 1997, and it's terrible what has happened. We had the world's best educational system. We destroyed it.
Yeah.
And we need to rebuild it.
If you take a look, and then we're going to get to our last question, I think, but if you take a look, and I do take a look at the college reports that are coming out, both from the White House, which is an annual report, which is the more rosy of them, right? And that's consistent with Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump, I'm sure Biden as well. They're rosy, but if you parse through it a little bit, they also they're diplomatically express that there's a lot of concern there. And then if you read some of the other reports, they're much more explicit that we're just not graduating the quality of students. And a lot of the talent that we have here is coming from overseas students, and a lot of the academic papers, which is one way of measuring our success in the educational system, is by measuring the number of academic papers and within particular industries. Those are a lot of overseas students who have come here, and most of them stay here, right? Yeah. But now that's kind of a warfare in itself, because we can't, there's migration has a dividend, right? And some of them, the fear is that they would return to, I'm part of Make in India, so I want them to return a little bit to India, return to just so many countries that have had their overseas students here. I do think about that.
Well, I do too, and I've been a part of this my whole life, and I've seen the dumbing down of education. The educational industrial complex in this country needs to be destroyed. It has gone too far. We've got to fix it. We got to quit dumbing down standards.
In your own company, and the companies of your friends, and I'm sure you have the experience, but you've also discussed with. Do you find there's a scarcity of talent that's out there? Is there a big enough reservoir for you to draw from?
Well, the answer is yes. There's a lot of good people, and good people want to work on really exciting things like what we're doing. And so we don't really have that much of a problem, but we're already bringing in people from other industries. We're bringing people directly out of school. But my philosophy is I have a lot of old timers who've been doing this for 35, 40 years who I can count on. And then we're using them to train the young people. And that's how I learned it when I first came into the industry. And we're instituting that model in my company as we grow, and we're going to do this, but we have to fix this educational system. So I don't understand why we've destroyed it, but it's destroyed.
I'm going to go back to Rising Serpent's question, because about the cartelization of space, right? Is there a fear? I wish I could find their comment again, but I'm not going to scroll for it. Is there a fear that Amazon and SpaceX, and I suppose we can call them the cartels, but they are what they are, right? Is that they'll create their own university system that is much less burdensome and much more targeted for what the skill sets that are required.
Well, Elon's already doing that with his kids, and
who is that?
Elon.
Yeah, but what if they institutionalize that? Doesn't that
build to do something?
I'm sorry, isn't that a cartelization of space? If they're kind of incubating tomorrow's employees, if they're incubating them through their education today, and
the only reason that happens is because the government and the government educational system are failing the people. And so what do? You can't just say, okay, government, and then government, and they never do it. We have to fix this. And we're doing the best we can, but the people that are just coming into Congress and President Biden and all, this isn't something that just started 4 years ago. This is something that's been going on for 30, 40, 50 years. And there was a terrible racist thing that happened when I first came to school, and that in the name of racial integration, and I was in the 5th grade when racial integration came to Alabama, is that we're going to teach to the lowest common denominator. That's fundamentally racist, in my opinion. We should have said, no, everybody is equal. Everybody's minds are the same. We need to teach everyone. And we need to teach everyone to the same standard, because everyone of all races, creeds, and colors have the ability to do these things. Quit dumbing it down.
I do worry about that, and I don't want to drift onto other topics, because there's I don't want to get lost in kind of the intricacies of our own creations with social issues. But yeah, and there's a really fascinating question, and thank you so much, Patricia, for joining us. And I'm glad that you've also rejoined social media. So thank you very much. So Patricia asked, how do you picture the participation of less developed countries in space?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
One of the things that space helps to bring is help to take some of the pressure off of the resource extraction from less developed countries from more developed countries, so that they can have those resources for themselves. It's the same thing as here. Educational system, it's drive, and I have great friends in Nigeria. I have great friends everywhere, and everyone has an opportunity. Just make the best of what you have, work hard, and I think everybody in the world has a chance to participate. And I picture it. You just have to focus on your government. My government, if I'm in Niger or Ghana or places like that, focus on the future, because it's all of our future.
And I think we're going to close on that because it's such a thought-provoking question.
It is a great question.
It is. We need a lot of people participating, and just from the investor side of it, and the person who's kind of loving the technology, I think that our companies, Boeing, and we discussed it, but Lockheed Martin, SpaceX. There's a lot of good kind of cartels, right? That are building their thing and they're kind of codifying their role. But there's a lot of downstream innovation. So a lot of countries are competing to be kind of the high yield downstream innovation.
Yep.
I do think that it can improve a lot of countries that I've visited in Africa and South America, and they've got really good talent, and hopefully they've got great talent in some of these places, but they have very unstable political systems.
They're not the only ones.
I know, and that creates a whole bunch of new problems. I have very good friends in Nigeria who left because they felt politically and physically threatened. And you have these brilliant PhDs and they leave. It's not a good thing. So I am going to actually end on this question because it's so interesting. So Semple Plevro 34, thank you so much for joining us. What books do you recommend on celestial navigation?
Fundamentals of Space Navigation. It's a 1962 book. You can probably find it on abe.com, or one of these days I may scan it and put it online. Fundamentals of Celestial Navigation. There's a whole bunch of books out there. Go to abe.com or go to Amazon and start looking for the books. There's tons of books out there. Look for people who've done graduate theses and have written software and published all their software. It's open source. It's open for everybody. So there's plenty of good resources out there.
I see another good question. Is there actually? I'm going to do a follow up on that question. What books are beyond just the one or two? Is there kind of like a bookshelf that you can recommend? And also, what are the trade journals? And by bookshelf, I mean kind of your kind of go-tos for when the books that you reread because they kind of
well,
let me just continue with that for just 1 second. Is what are the trade journals that you read, the specialist journals? I don't read most newspapers. I don't watch TV at all, but I'm very focused on my things I'm particularly interested in. What are the things that you read?
AIAA conference papers, Journal of Space Navigation, Joint Propulsion Conference. There's just a ton of those out there, especially anything through AIAA. IEEE has a lot of really good stuff. There's tons and tons and tons of.
You use the abbreviations.
AIAA, just look AIAA.org. It is the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. It's the oldest aerospace professional organization. It's a fantastic organization. The IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, tremendous millions of papers on all these subjects, and you should be able to find them. Go to your college libraries. That way you don't have to pay $30 a paper. find your academic ways of accessing all of this stuff. It's all out there for you.
There's actually 3 more comments. Is that all right? So everybody, we're going to go a little bit over. It's something that I think about a lot. So so here, the girl WNOSAJ. It's, for me, it's really small. So so thank you so much for joining us. And interesting question. They say a lot of geologists and geophysicists are out of work right now. Any future with Space Force?
Planetary science, lunar geology, Martian geology. Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe go back and refresh your degree, take some courses in planetary geology, material science. Arizona State University is a great one. University of Arizona, there's a ton there's going to be a ton of need for geologists and geophysicists that we now call selenologists and selenophysicists for the moon and for Mars.
It's interesting. And again, this is one of the reasons I'm so focused on education. I have my own company, and we have always looking for encryption talent. We've dug through where to find that talent. And I'd say the only place that China is actually beating America in terms of the students that it's producing is actually in agriculture, mining, and geology. Did you know that?
Well, yeah.
We no longer have a lot of students graduating with those degrees. We have a lot of AI. So, we have kind of an abundance there, and, but, or not an abundance, but we have a supply there. But we have the students who used to graduate and then go on to Mobil or Exxon or whatever it is, or Chevron. We don't have those students anymore.
Well, it's part of and I understand when I was in school, they were trying to cut down the number of physicists in the early 1990s after the drawdown in the defense budget after we won the Cold War. So I get that, but be dedicated to your craft. I think there's a tremendous opportunity out there for geologists and geophysicists going forward off the planet.
And this is going to be our last question, and I love this question. So I hope everyone will get an appreciation of this question because it's philosophical in its own way. And I'm going to respond to a little bit first. Shubi, thank you so much for being here. Everyone who's watching this now gets to look at the question in advance of me calling it out. So Shubi, SCHUBIE, says, will space firms only hire from traditional universities? What about self-taught or non-traditional? I'm going to be responsive to that first, if that's all right. I went to Wall Street. I knew from the time I was probably 6 to 10 what I wanted to kind of do somewhat. Then I discovered Wall Street and the world of finance. And I wanted to get out of high school as quickly as I could because I wanted to go work in finance. And in college, I thought after I was there for a year, I felt like I was wasting my time. I felt like I could beat all of my competitors if I kind of prepared myself to go to Wall Street right now. And by the time those students had graduated with their advanced degrees or whatever they thought was going to be necessary, I'd already have the job that they wanted. So I went to Wall Street very young, and I was very kind that the mentors I acquired there and my employers love taking in young talent. They look at it as their own investment, and they allowed me to backfill my education.
Yeah,
it's a remarkable thing, and hopefully that's something that's still true today. But I was able to kind of come in with charm and charisma and expressing my dedication, and that I know that it's a confidence in me, and I want to return that confidence to them and be a long-time employee and be good. And I backfilled all of my education.
Yeah. I did the same thing. I did exactly the same thing. I came out of high school.
I'm going to ask the question again now, just because I wandered, so that everybody can appreciate it. It's going to be our closing. So should be asked, will space firms only hire from traditional universities? What about self-taught or non-traditional?
When I first started in the computer industry, the vast majority of people were self-taught, non-traditional, non-degreed, and we did remarkable things. And I think the same thing is going to be necessary in space, but you're going to have to be good at your craft. And I can't tell you the number of my friends when I was young that were non-degreed. And the degreed engineers, when they graduate from university, they would get put under me for a year to actually learn how to be an engineer when I was a tech. So the answer is yes. And just work hard, know your craft. It's going to work out.
So what I did is I spent all my time in the business libraries.
Yeah.
Now, so is there still that kind of opportunity, or has that window been closed where now it's kind of an exclusionary type of thing where it's demanded that you have an advanced degree and $200,000 in debt? Is there kind of a way around that, a shortcut around that?
Absolutely. Again, like what you said, come in and be a tech, or come in and sweep the floors and say, I really want to learn this stuff. What can I do? Online, there's such an amazing set of resources online. You don't have to go to the library anymore. Everything's online. The internet's not all crap.
Those resources, are those the trade journals that you referenced before? Or there are other things that you think of as kind of the online education?
There's so much that are in the open. NASA it's called ntrs.nasa.gov, which is a tremendous resource of space-related materials. Learn that. I use it every day almost. ntrs.nasa.gov, and it's free.
Yeah, and I think there's even lists I've seen. I'm not sure who publishes it, but it's let me see if I can find it, because I've sent it to friends before. It's the Space Talent Network. Have you ever seen that?
I have. That sounds pretty cool.
It's jobs.spacetalent.org, and there's a lot of resources for people looking for jobs in space.
Yeah.
So I'll share that link with everybody. Until I do share it, though, it's jobs.spacetalent.org.
Cool.
And it is cool. Everybody, this has been so awesome. I've had such a good time. And I want to thank everybody for allowing Dennis and I to be the guest on your feed today.
Thank you so kindly for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Dennis, you are awesome. And I so much appreciate everybody's questions, really thoughtful questions. And this is going to be, I think we're going to have to do 4 parts, because I really want to drill down into the economics of the startup ecosystem, and which is something we couldn't get to today, but what the ecosystem looks like for the startups. But this is such a big subject that we can't do it all at once, right?
Space is our future.
It is. And you know what I'm going to close up with? Because Stephen joined us, I'm going to close up with that thing that he did for us. So everybody's going to see Stephen Quast talk about space. And as soon as that ends, I'm going to be saying goodbye to everybody. Dennis, when I press the button, everyone's going to go, but you're going to stay. Okay. So it'll just be you and me, and we're going to close with this.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant General Steve Quast, retired, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the power of the Space Force at being the instrument of peace and prosperity in the future economy of cislunar space. Anytime we move into a new environment, you have to have predictability and security in the 3 elements of economic development and growth, and that's energy delivery, transportation, and communications. With the Space Force holding everybody accountable to the values we treasure, the respect for Mother Earth and the respect for other human beings, we can have economic vibrancy that blesses everybody and ushers in a new dimension of prosperity for all human beings. The Space Force is that foundation, bringing rule of law and the blessings we all need from space. Thank you for helping in this enterprise, and good luck.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Bye. Now I'm saying.